Imagine this. A devoted wife, her heart freshly shattered by loss, stands alone in the home she built with love, only to overhear the unthinkable. Her own flesh and blood, scheming to strip her of everything. Welcome to Payback Stories, where betrayal meets its match in the sweetest revenge. And hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now for more tales of justice served cold. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when greed backfires spectacularly. Meet Eleanor Thompson, a spry 72-year-old widow from the quiet suburbs of Chicago. Her silver hair frames a face that carries decades of quiet strength, etched lines that tell stories of loyalty, sacrifice, and love. She walks with a grace that comes not from wealth or power, but from surviving life's storms with her dignity intact. For 50 years, Eleanor stood by her husband, Robert, a proud Vietnam veteran who gave his youth to serve his country. Together, they built a modest but meaningful life, a cozy 3-bedroom house on a tree-lined street, a pension saved carefully over the years, holiday dinners with laughter spilling from the dining room, the kind of legacy that isn't flashy but is rich in memory and honor. When Robert passed, after a long battle with illness, Eleanor's world dimmed. The laughter that once rang out through the halls vanished, leaving behind an echoing silence. Nights stretched endlessly. Mornings felt heavy. She found herself wandering from room to room, touching the photographs on the walls as though they might bring him back. On one such afternoon, Eleanor sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She pulled out a battered album, its leather cover worn soft with time. Inside, the faded Polaroids told the story of a life. Birthdays with paper hats, Christmas trees glowing in the background, Robert holding the kids high on his shoulders, Eleanor in the kitchen with flour dusting her cheeks. Each photo was a fragment of love immortalized on glossy paper. But then, a sound. Voices from the kitchen. Familiar voices. Her children. At first, Eleanor smiled faintly, grateful for their presence. Michael, her eldest, 39 now, always the one with plans and schemes. And Sarah, 35, charming and sharp-tongued, who had inherited Robert's quick wit but not his selflessness. Eleanor leaned closer, thinking maybe they were sharing memories of their father. Maybe grief had softened them. But the words that reached her ears froze her blood. Michael's voice, low but unmistakably calculating. The house is worth at least $500,000 now. Once she's gone, we sell and split it. A pause. Then Sarah's voice, dripping with entitlement. She doesn't need all that space anyway. A nursing home will do. It's better for her, and for us. Eleanor's hand trembled on the page of a Christmas morning photo, her breath catching. For a moment, she thought she must have misheard. Surely her children, her flesh and blood, would never say such things. But as their conversation continued, the truth sank in like ice water. Her children weren't grieving. They weren't worried about her well-being. They were plotting, scheming to take everything she and Robert had built together, discarding her like she was an inconvenience. The sting of betrayal hit her like a thunderclap. The woman who had kissed scraped knees, stayed up through fevers, and sacrificed her own dreams to give them better lives, now realized her children valued her not as a mother, but as an obstacle standing in the way of profit. Her chest tightened, not with sorrow this time, but with fire. She thought of Robert, his stories of resilience in the jungles of Vietnam, his determination to never back down even when the odds were impossible. That same resilience flickered now in her heart. Maybe her children thought she was weak. Maybe they assumed age and grief had dulled her spirit. But they were about to learn something important. Eleanor Thompson was far from finished. What if this betrayal, as cruel as it was, awakened a sleeping giant inside her? What if the widow they underestimated was about to show them just how sharp her claws could be? As the whispers from the kitchen faded, Eleanor closed the album slowly. She set it aside with trembling but steady hands. Without a word, she rose to her feet and slipped quietly down the hall, unseen, unheard. Her mind was already racing, plans forming in the shadows of her grief. Little did Michael and Sarah know, their mother wasn't going to be the victim of their greed. She was going to be the architect of their downfall. This widow's sorrow was about to forge the ultimate payback. Transitioning from that fateful eavesdrop, let's rewind to the foundations of Eleanor's life, where love and duty built a fortress, now under siege. Eleanor Thompson wasn't just any woman. She was forged in an era of upheaval, resilience, and unwavering values. The year was 1968, Chicago alive with the rhythm of change, when fate introduced her to the man who would define her life. She was a young nurse then, barely 20, working long shifts at the VA hospital. He was Robert Thompson, a soldier just back from the jungles of Vietnam, scarred but unbowed. His body bore wounds of battle, but his spirit radiated strength. The ribbons on his uniform spoke of valor, of American grit tested in the fiercest crucible. Their meeting wasn't romantic in the Hollywood sense. It was practical, raw, and real. She tended to his injuries, changing bandages with steady hands, offering small comforts to ease the pain. But what struck her most wasn't his suffering. It was his resilience. Robert cracked jokes through the pain, spoke of his brothers in arms with reverence, and looked at the American flag outside the ward window with a loyalty that made Eleanor's heart swell. A courtship blossomed quickly, built not on candlelit dinners but on quiet conversations in hospital corridors. By the following spring, they stood in a courthouse, hand in hand. No frills, no crowd, just a vow. Through thick and thin, through sickness and health, they would build a family rooted in patriotism, sacrifice, and hard work. Michael came first, a boisterous baby who grew into a boy obsessed with his father's war tales. He would sit at Robert's feet for hours, wide-eyed as he listened to stories of courage under fire, idolizing every word. A few years later came Sarah, Robert's pride and joy. He worked double shifts at the factory to buy her dresses. She would twirl in until she was dizzy, her laughter filling every corner of their home. Their house in Oak Park became the beating heart of their lives. The backyard was a sanctuary of barbecues, neighbors waving flags on the 4th of July, and children chasing fireflies until dusk. At Christmas, even when money was tight, Robert and Eleanor made sure the tree was buried in gifts, a testament to love's ability to stretch beyond limits. Robert worked tirelessly at the steel factory, his calloused hands and aching back proof of his devotion. Every dollar was carefully saved. College funds for Michael and Sarah, emergency savings, a pension plan. Eleanor, meanwhile, ran the household like a general with a nurse's precision. She taught her children respect, discipline, and sacrifice, lessons she believed would shape them into honorable adults. On weekends, the family often gathered at the local VFW hall. Robert would sit with fellow veterans, sharing stories of the front lines, the kind that never made it into history books. Michael and Sarah would tag along, absorbing lessons of duty and loyalty, even if they didn't yet understand the weight behind the words. Those halls, draped with flags and photographs of fallen heroes, became another classroom for them, a reminder that freedom came at a cost. As the years passed, the children thrived. Michael, ambitious and quick-thinking, entered real estate, his sharp eye spotting opportunities others overlooked. Sarah, creative and determined, climbed the corporate ladder in marketing, always chasing the next big promotion. Eleanor and Robert swelled with pride, believing their sacrifices had paid off. But with success came distance. Phone calls dwindled. Visits became rare, always excused with busy schedules and looming deadlines. Robert brushed it off, telling Eleanor, "That's life, honey. They've got their own roads to walk." Eleanor nodded, though deep inside she missed the days when family dinners were the anchor of their week. Then came the slow decline. At first, Robert's aches seemed like remnants of old war injuries. But then the diagnosis came, merciless, inevitable. His vitality ebbed away, replaced by hospital visits, treatments, and nights when Eleanor held his hand, whispering memories to remind him of the life they had built. She became his full-time caregiver, bathing him, feeding him, carrying his dignity when his body could not. Through it all, Michael and Sarah promised support. "We'll be there, Mom," they said during brief phone calls. But promises faded into excuses, missed doctor's appointments, forgotten anniversaries, a distance not just of miles but of heart. Still, Eleanor clung to hope. She believed family bonds were like the flag Robert insisted on raising outside their home each morning. Steady, unbreakable, defiant against the storms. Robert's final days were both heartbreaking and beautiful. Lying in bed, frail yet proud, he gripped Eleanor's hand with surprising strength. "Take care of our home," he whispered, voice ragged. "It's our legacy. Promise me." She nodded through tears, vowing to honor him until her last breath. The funeral was a somber affair. Veterans in uniform saluted his casket, the folded flag placed gently in Eleanor's lap. Michael and Sarah stood by, shedding tears that felt more obligatory than heartfelt. Within days, they returned to their busy lives, leaving Eleanor in a house that suddenly felt far too quiet. In the weeks that followed, she wandered aimlessly from room to room. She would pause at Robert's favorite armchair, press her face into the cushion, inhaling the faint trace of his aftershave. She would stand in the garden he loved, fingertips brushing the roses he had planted for her every spring. Grief wrapped her like a heavy shroud, suffocating yet strangely protective. But then, small signs. Michael, during a rare visit, walking the perimeter of the property, eyes sharp as though measuring its worth. Sarah sipping coffee at the kitchen table, asking casually about the will, her tone too rehearsed, her questions too pointed. At first, Eleanor brushed it off. Perhaps it was concern. Perhaps they were clumsy in their way of looking out for her. But doubt crept in, a shadow growing longer each day. One sunny afternoon, pruning Robert's roses, the phone rang. It was Dorothy, an old friend from the VFW. Her voice carried a warning Eleanor hadn't expected. "Watch your back, dear," Dorothy said gently. "Greed changes people. I've seen it too many times." Eleanor froze, the pruning shears slipping slightly in her grip. Dorothy's words planted a seed, a suspicion that would soon bloom into something undeniable. Her children had once been the very center of her world. But now, she wondered, were they still the pillars she imagined them to be, or wolves cloaked in the skins of her beloved children? The answer was coming, and with it, a reckoning that would shake the Thompson family to its core. But how deep did the deception run? And what if the betrayal Eleanor feared was only just beginning to unfold? The cracks in the family's facade widened like hairline fractures spreading across glass. At first barely noticeable, but soon impossible to ignore. Eleanor could feel it in the air, in the careful phrasing of her children's words, in the way their eyes lingered not on her, but on the walls of her house, as though they were appraising a property rather than visiting their mother. Michael began showing up more often, though never with the warmth she longed for. He didn't come bearing casseroles or to sit at her kitchen table with coffee and conversation. No, he came with real estate pamphlets tucked under his arm, glossy photos of beachfront condos and senior living communities that he spread across the dining table. "Mom," he said with a salesman's smile, "have you thought about downsizing? Florida's nice this time of year. Lots of people your age make the move. It's practical." Eleanor smiled politely, nodding as though she were considering it. But inside, alarm bells clanged. Why this sudden interest in her living arrangements? She was healthy, independent, perfectly capable of caring for herself. Her husband had trusted her to guard their home, their legacy. Yet here was her son, nudging her out the door. Sarah joined the chorus, though her approach was subtler. Filtered through video calls from her sleek downtown office, her face would freeze in pixels, but her message came through crystal clear. "Mom, you know tuition's getting crazy. Dad's pension could help with the kids' future. Maybe we should think about updating the will to reflect that?" The words stung. Robert had worked decades for that pension, often through pain and exhaustion, to ensure that Eleanor was provided for. And now his daughter, her daughter, was suggesting slicing it apart as though it were a pie to be divided. At first, Eleanor tried to dismiss it. Maybe they were clumsy in their wording. Maybe grief was twisting everyone's priorities. But the pressure kept coming, not in explosions, but in drips, steady and corrosive. Forgotten birthdays, missed invitations, short, curt responses when she asked for dinner together. Subtle slights that made her feel less like a mother and more like a burden. One evening, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, steam curling from her cup of chamomile tea. Spread before her were letters Robert had written decades ago, while working late shifts. His handwriting was steady, unwavering even after 12-hour days at the factory. One line leapt from the page. "Our home is for you, Ellie. Don't let anyone take your peace." Her throat tightened as she traced the words with her fingertip. Robert had known, somehow, even then. He had sensed she might face this battle. Still, the isolation gnawed at her. She reached out to Michael, asking if he could help trim the hedges and mow the lawn. His answer was swift and cold. "Too busy closing a deal, Mom. Hire someone." Sarah's visits carried their own sting. She would step through the door, her eyes sweeping over the decor with thinly veiled disdain. "This place is outdated. We could flip it for a fortune. Just imagine what a young family would pay for a place like this." Eleanor's protests, that this was her home, her life, her memories, bounced off deaf ears. Tensions peaked during a rare family lunch. Eleanor had cooked Robert's favorite pot roast, filling the kitchen with aromas of thyme and garlic, hoping to draw her children back into the warmth of family tradition. But as she served the meal, she noticed the glances Michael and Sarah exchanged, hushed whispers of future plans, sliding between bites of meat and potatoes. She felt it then. The shift. To them, she was no longer the matriarch, the anchor of the household. She was an obstacle, a hurdle standing between them and what they wanted. Sleepless nights followed. She would lie in Robert's side of the bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories replaying like cruel films, teaching Michael to ride his bike, steadying the handlebars as he wobbled down the street, sewing Sarah's prom dress by hand when they couldn't afford a designer one. The sacrifices she had made, the love she had poured into every stitch of their upbringing, had it all meant nothing? One morning, while fetching the newspaper, her neighbor, Mr. Connolly, waved casually. "Saw your son measuring the fence the other day. Planning renovations?" The words hit her like ice water. Eleanor forced a smile, but inside her suspicion sharpened. Measuring the fence? Why, unless he was already envisioning changes after she was gone? At her weekly bridge game, Eleanor confided in her friends, women who, like her, had buried husbands and weathered the loneliness of widowhood. Their reactions were immediate, knowing, almost resigned. "Kids these days," murmured one. "Chasing dollars instead of duty." "You're not alone, Eleanor," said another. "My son tried to push me into a condo, said it was for my own good." But it was the inheritance he was eyeing. Their voices comforted her, but the ache didn't fade. Some nights, she wept quietly into her pillow, questioning herself. Had she spoiled her children? Had she failed to teach them the very values she and Robert had lived by? It was during one of these dark moments that she found herself rummaging through Robert's old military trunk, tucked away in the attic. Beneath folded uniforms and carefully stored medals, she discovered a worn leather journal. Flipping through its pages, she stopped at a simple entry. "Proud of our kids, but teach them honor above all. Without honor, everything else crumbles." Her tears blurred the ink, but the words cut clear. Honor. That was what had been lost. And maybe, just maybe, it was up to her to remind them of it, in a way they'd never forget. But the manipulations didn't stop. They escalated. Michael arrived one afternoon with papers in hand. his tone casual but insistent. "Mom, this is just a power of attorney. For your protection, you know. In case something happens, we can handle things for you." The next week, Sarah pressed harder. "Why not get the house appraised? Just to know its worth. Doesn't hurt to plan ahead." Eleanor's heart ached at their persistence, but beneath the sorrow, her resolve began to harden. She remembered Robert's words, remembered his hand squeezing hers in his final moments. "Take care of our home. It's our legacy." So she began to watch, to listen more closely, to wait. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the curtains, Eleanor reclined in her armchair, feigning sleep. The soft hum of the clock filled the silence, until the door opened. Michael and Sarah stepped inside, their voices hushed but urgent. "Once she's in assisted living, we can put the house on the market immediately," Michael muttered. "Don't worry," Sarah replied. "I'll convince her it's for her own good. We just need her signature." The words sliced through the quiet like a knife. Eleanor's body tensed beneath the blanket, her breath shallow. They weren't just hinting now. They were planning, out loud, in her own home. That was the moment the storm broke. The betrayal she had feared was no longer suspicion. It was reality. And with that revelation came clarity. Eleanor knew what she had to do. The children thought they were plotting her downfall. What they didn't realize was that their scheming had awakened the warrior spirit of a widow who had stood by a soldier, learned resilience from him, and now carried his legacy of strength within her. The battle lines were drawn, and Eleanor Thompson was ready. From the shadows of her feigned slumber, the truth unveiled itself with cruel clarity. Every word her children spoke cut deeper than any knife, shattering Eleanor's illusions like fragile glass. Michael's voice came first, steady and cold, his words slicing the quiet. "Once Dad's gone, the house is prime real estate. We force her into assisted living, sell quick, and split the profit." Eleanor's breath caught in her chest. He wasn't even speaking in hypotheticals. He was speaking as though her life, her future, her home were already a deal waiting to be signed. Sarah chimed in eagerly, her tone sharp and greedy. "She won't fight. She's too sentimental. Split the proceeds 50-50. Pay off my loans, your mortgage. Easy." Their callousness was unbearable. Eleanor's blood ran cold, her body frozen beneath the blanket as their laughter echoed in the room. She listened as they rifled through drawers, footsteps pounding across hardwood floors. "Where does she keep it?" Michael muttered. "The will. We need to know what's coming." The words hit harder than any insult. They weren't concerned for her future, her well-being, or even her health. They wanted the paperwork, the signature, proof of what they believed was rightfully theirs. Sitting silent, Eleanor's mind was a storm. Flashbacks struck her with cruel force. Robert's hospital bed, his frail hand clasping hers while their children promised eternal support. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll always be here." Those words now rang hollow, their vows exposed as little more than lies meant to pacify a dying man. Anger bubbled beneath the shock. How dare they dishonor their father's memory? Robert had fought for his country, bled for freedom, worked himself to the bone for his family, and now his children treated his sacrifices as stepping stones for their own comfort. Still, Eleanor remained still, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Her heart pounded, yet she knew she couldn't reveal her awareness. Not yet. Michael's voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. "We'll convince her it's for the best. Sell her on some fancy retirement home. She's old. She won't know any better." Sarah laughed, bitter and dismissive. "Exactly. She's outlived her usefulness. Time to cash in." The cruelty of those words burned. Silent tears slid down Eleanor's cheeks, soaking into her pillow. She wasn't their mother anymore, not in their eyes. She was an asset, a number on a balance sheet, a means to an end. The siblings left eventually, satisfied with their plotting, their footsteps retreating out the door. Eleanor rose slowly from her chair, her hands trembling so violently she had to grip the table to steady herself. The children she had nurtured, protected, and loved with her whole being were revealed as opportunists, wolves dressed in the skin of family. That night, Eleanor sat in her darkened living room, Robert's framed photo in her lap. His familiar smile stared back at her, kind eyes frozen in time. Her tears blurred the glass. "What have our children become?" She whispered. "Where did we go wrong?" The pain was raw, jagged, unbearable. But somewhere inside it, a spark flickered. She thought of Robert's war stories, the ones where he and his brothers outwitted enemies who underestimated them, where survival came not from brute strength but from strategy, patience, and courage. That spark grew. She realized she could not crumble. She would not be the victim they imagined. So Eleanor began her quiet work. Each day she jotted notes in a hidden journal, recording snippets of conversations, details of their manipulation, every insult they let slip. She knew documentation would be her shield, her weapon. But the betrayal didn't end there. It only deepened. When Eleanor tested her children, feigning illness with a shaky voice over the phone, both brushed her off. "Can't today, Mom. Busy with clients," Michael said briskly. "Sorry, Mom. I've got meetings stacked all day," Sarah added, not bothering to ask if she needed help. The excuses piled up, their indifference undeniable. The bonds she once thought unbreakable were already dust. On a quiet Sunday, Eleanor visited Robert's grave. The autumn wind rattled the branches overhead as she knelt before the headstone, brushing leaves from the carved letters of his name. "I'll protect what we built, my love," she whispered. "For us, for honor. They won't take it from me." The words steadied her. They gave her strength. But even as determination grew, so did the loneliness. Nights stretched long, the silence of the house pressing down on her chest. Yet the hurt, the emptiness, only sharpened her resolve. She would fight not just for herself, but for the legacy she and Robert had poured their lives into. Have you ever felt the sting of family turning foe? That moment when the people you trusted most reveal themselves as strangers. That was the fire burning in Eleanor now. Rage, betrayal, and a determination boiling, ready to erupt. She began gathering evidence with careful precision. A small recording device tucked in her pocket during their visits. Emails she intercepted when Sarah carelessly left her laptop open during a stay. Eleanor documented every word, every plan, every shred of proof that her children's motives were drenched in greed. What she uncovered horrified her. Michael had already spoken to a lawyer about contesting the will, should the inheritance not fall in their favor. Sarah had drafted emails about asset liquidation strategies, as though her mother's life was a portfolio to be managed. The betrayal was complete. Eleanor's world inverted. She was no longer the trusting mother who believed her children could do no wrong. She was no longer the grieving widow clinging to hope. She was something new, a wary avenger cloaked in patience, armed with knowledge, and fueled by a righteous fury. But what form would her justice take? That answer she kept close to her heart. All Eleanor knew for certain was this: her children thought they were orchestrating her downfall. In truth, they were setting the stage for their own. The pieces were aligning. The reckoning was near. And when it came, Michael and Sarah would never see it coming. Emerging from the fog of betrayal, Eleanor let grief harden into a precise instrument. Where sorrow had once clouded her, resolve now cleared the air. If her children thought they could treat her life as a transaction, she would answer with strategy. Quiet, lawful, and unforgiving. Her first move was practical. Get help she could trust. She didn't call some big city firm. She called Tom Grady, an old friend from Robert's VFW days who'd once helped the family with a small estate matter. Tom was a soft-spoken retired JAG who still wore his respect for veterans like a second uniform. When she told him, in the VFW canteen with the stale coffee and framed photos of men in uniform watching over them, he listened without surprise. "They want your home?" he said, tapping his pen. they'll get nothing but regret. He swore an oath of secrecy and began to draw up documents. The rewrite of the will was surgical. Everything, house, savings, Robert's medals, and the heirlooms Eleanor had kept in cedar chests, was to be left not to her children, but to a veterans charity that had meant the world to Robert, Freedom's Watch Veterans Foundation, a small, rugged organization that provided transitional housing and job training for returning veterans. Eleanor liked the symmetry. The family that had once lived by a code of honor would see their legacy diverted to men and women who'd actually earned it. There was a delicious cruelty in the irony. Michael and Sarah, chasing every dollar, would find their greed redirected to people who'd bled for the flag. Eleanor smiled inwardly at that thought. The legal language was airtight. Tom double-checked every clause, ensured the transfer mechanisms were immediate upon probate, and crafted contingencies to guard against the kinds of cynical legal challenges her children might mount. While Tom handled the paperwork, Eleanor turned detective. Evidence, she decided, would be the backbone of her case and the dagger of the reveal. She bought small recording devices, discreet, readily available, and placed them in common spaces where conversations tended to wander. The kitchen, the den, the hall outside the study. She learned a little about camera angles and audio clarity, enough to make the recordings undeniable, but not so much that she aroused suspicion. Each device captured muffled footsteps, planning whispers, and the raw, unguarded language of people plotting to displace their mother. She practiced the poker face of a saint. In front of Michael, she laughed at his Florida brochures and nodded when he said, "Practical." With Sarah, she spoke fondly of college funds when the subject came up, asking innocent questions that let them reveal more than they intended. If they suggested power of attorney or appraisals, Eleanor let them have her smiling assent, all the while inwardly tallying their lies. Timing would make or break everything. The family had one annual tradition so sacrosanct that no one questioned it. The summer reunion at Robert's lake house, the weekend he'd insisted upon every year since Michael and Sarah were children. It was a ritual packed with speeches, barbecue smoke, contentious Monopoly games, and importantly, an audience. Eleanor knew the reunion drew cousins, aunts, old friends, veterans from the VFW, people whose witness would matter. She set the trap there. Invitations went out with pristine enthusiasm. "Let's honor Dad together," she wrote on cards she sent herself, each postage stamp a small, deliberate lie. Behind the scenes, Tom completed the legal scaffolding, signed codicils, notarizations, and the charity transfer protocol, all locked in escrow with instructions to enact after the family meeting. He agreed to stand by and present the documents if needed. Eleanor liked that steady, unornamented certainty. She bolstered her plan with emotional armor. Mornings she spent at the VFW, where veterans gave her stories and strength, and where Tom had contacts who could testify to Robert's devotion to service and to the value such a charity would provide. There, among men who still saluted the flag in quiet ways, she practiced how to hold a room's attention, how to keep her voice steady when anger pounded behind it. She even let herself sketch a future where betrayal didn't exist. Late at night, she browsed Florida retirement communities, not because she intended to run, but because the fantasy steadied her. Palm trees, sunlit porches, a small bungalow by the water. It reminded her that a life beyond this fight existed, and that thought steadied her nerves when cold doubt crept in. Refinements multiplied. She planned to play the recordings aloud at the reunion, to let the words hang in the warm summer air, where everyone could hear them. First, a softer cut. Snippets of Michael and Sarah plotting the assisted living ruse, their talk of splitting proceeds. Then, more damning proof. Michael asking where the will was kept, Sarah outlining what debts they'd pay off. The audio would do what accusations couldn't. It would offer indisputable fact. She staged a gentle test run. One afternoon, she accidentally left a draft of a will on the kitchen table, its pages visible when a nosy Michael popped by. He glanced, nodded the way a wolf studies a map, and later mentioned details that confirmed his appetite. His reaction proved her suspicions true and tightened her plan. Allies multiplied. She quietly tipped off trusted friends and members of the VFW, people who would show up at the reunion not to gloat, but to witness. The presence of others she knew would prevent a quick private pressure campaign to change her mind. She also printed copies of certain emails and made hidden backups of recordings on thumb drives she cached in a locked drawer at Tom's office. Eleanor took small, quiet steps to protect the family history she didn't want consumed. She packed the most meaningful mementos into a trunk to carry with her when the time came. A locket, a folded flag, Robert's favorite pipe. She labeled boxes with her own hand, preemptively moving the pieces of a life she refused to have parceled out by calculation. The beauty of the scheme lay in its purity. Legal, non-violent, and devastating. No traps, no blackmail, only exposure and redirection. The plan would hum with moral clarity. Show the world what they were, then legally remove their spoils. As the reunion neared, Eleanor rehearsed her speech from a lawn chair in the dark, voice quiet but firm. "You betrayed us," she practiced, "and now you must face the consequences." She imagined Michael's face when the recordings played, Sarah's sudden pallor, the cousins' shocked murmurs. She imagined the VFW brothers' nods when she announced the charity. She felt a rush of something that was not quite joy. It was justice, distilled and cold. Confidence arrived in measured waves. This wasn't merely payback. It was a tribute to Robert's life and the ideals he had taught. Honor, service, and a stubborn refusal to let a life be taken by the hands that owed everything to it. The stage was set. The players were all in position. Eleanor, the widow the children had underestimated, had threaded patience with proof, law with publicity. The reunion would be the last casual family weekend they ever had. Now all that remained was to wait for the moment when her quiet, slow-acting plan would become an open wound, a reckoning that would leave no room for excuses. Reunion day dawned crisp and clear, the kind of Midwest morning Robert would have called a soldier's sky. Blue, sharp, and clean. At the lake house, laughter drifted over the water, smoke curled from the grill, and folding chairs dotted the lawn. From the outside, it was a family gathering like any other. Inside, Eleanor's chest thrummed with a secret rhythm. Today, masks would fall. Cars rolled up the gravel drive one by one. Nieces in sundresses, cousins carrying potato salad, neighbors who remembered Robert's barbecues, and among them, a handful of VFW buddies Eleanor had called just days before, their weathered faces kind but watchful. None knew why she'd invited them last minute. Soon they would. Michael and Sarah arrived last, striding across the grass with carefully rehearsed smiles. Michael carried a bottle of wine he hadn't bothered to wrap. Sarah held a box of store-bought cupcakes. "Mom, you look great," Sarah gushed, kissing her cheek. Michael added, "We'll talk future plans later, yeah? Big opportunities." Their words slid smooth as butter, but their eyes gleamed with calculation. Eleanor, apron-tied, tray of lemonade in hand, played her part. She poured, she smiled. She told stories about Robert's fishing trips. Her recorder hidden in her pocket captured every smirk, every whispered aside. She kept her tone light, but her pulse ticked louder with each passing hour. By midday, the scent of sizzling ribs thickened the air. Children splashed in the lake, beer cans cracked open, yet tension slithered beneath the picnic chatter. Near the grill, Eleanor caught their voices again. Michael leaned close to Sarah, muttering, "After today, we push the sail. She's softening. Won't be long." Sarah smirked. "Good. About time." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat, steadying herself. This was it. The moment Robert's legacy demanded. She clinked her glass mid-afternoon. rising slowly from her chair. "Family," she began, her voice quivering with a practiced tremble. "Let's raise a toast to Robert, our hero." The crowd murmured, glasses lifted. Veterans saluted. Tears welled in her eyes, some real, some rehearsed. Then she drew a breath, and her voice sharpened. "But before we honor him further, let's hear what my children really think of me, and of this home." The borrowed projector flickered to life, screen unfurling against the garage wall. A click, and then Michael's voice filled the lawn. "Once Dad's gone, the house is prime real estate. We force her into assisted living. Sell quick." Gasps shot through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes narrowing. Sarah's voice followed, chilling in its casual cruelty. "She won't fight. She's too sentimental. Split the proceeds 50-50. Pay off my loans, your mortgage. Easy." Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Faces paled, chairs creaked as people shifted, stunned. Michael's jaw slackened, then tightened. That's out of context," he stammered. Sarah's cheeks flushed crimson. "Mom, that's not fair. We were just discussing options." Eleanor stood taller, stronger than she'd felt in months. "Options?" Her voice cracked like a whip. "You plotted to steal my home. You laughed about discarding me like I was nothing. Not one word about my health, my happiness. Just money. Your father's memory, his sacrifice, reduced to numbers on a ledger." The family erupted. Uncles scolded, voices thick with fury. "Shame on you." Cousins avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with the spectacle. The veterans shook their heads, jaws clenched at the dishonor. Michael lunged forward, reaching for the projector. "Turn it off!" But Eleanor's hand shot out steady. "It's too late," she said, calm as steel. "The will is already changed. Everything. This home, the savings, your father's legacy, goes to veterans' charities. Men and women who deserve it far more than you." Sarah's tears spilled over. "How could you do this to us, Mom? We're your children." Eleanor's reply cut clean and merciless. "How could you betray your father? The man who broke his back for you, who carried scars from war so you could grow up free. You spit on his memory with your greed. You stopped being my children the moment you chose money over honor." The scene devolved into chaos. Michael cursed under his breath, pacing like a trapped wolf. Sarah wailed accusations. "You twisted this. You set us up." But the crowd wasn't buying it. One by one, guests collected their things, shaking heads, muttering in disgust. The once joyful reunion cracked apart, splintered beyond repair. Eleanor stood in the center of it all, a lighthouse against the storm. She didn't tremble. She didn't flinch. Then, as if on cue, Tom Grady stepped forward, briefcase in hand. "Forgive the interruption," he said, his calm voice slicing through the din. "I am Eleanor's attorney. Here are the signed, notarized documents confirming the transfer of all assets to the Freedom's Watch Veterans Foundation. The donation is irrevocable, effective immediately." He laid the papers on the picnic table, the signatures glinting in the afternoon light. Gasps echoed again. Not shock this time, but awe. The trap had snapped shut. Michael's shoulders sagged, defeated. Sarah's sobs turned hollow. They stormed out together, their car tires spitting gravel as they sped down the drive. No one waved goodbye. Relief washed over Eleanor. Not joy, not gloating, but a deep, weary satisfaction. Justice had been delivered, as sharp and final as Robert's salute at the end of his service, as the sun bled into the horizon, painting the lake in gold and crimson. Eleanor stood on the porch, alone, The air was still, the house quiet. Victory felt bittersweet, like coffee strong enough to sting but warm enough to steady. She had lost. Her children, yes. But she had gained her dignity, her peace, and the knowledge that Robert's legacy would endure untarnished. The lake lapped gently at the shore, as if saluting her resolve. The war was over. She had won. But the ripples of her choice would carry far beyond this evening. For Michael and Sarah, life would never be the same. And for Eleanor, the next chapter was waiting. Sunny, free, and hers alone. The dust of the reunion slowly settled, leaving behind a world forever changed. Where once there had been the illusion of family unity, now there was truth, raw, unflinching, undeniable. Eleanor walked away from that day knowing nothing would be the same again. And she welcomed it. For Michael and Sarah, the fallout was immediate and brutal. News of the recording spread quickly, whispered from one cousin to another, then on to neighborhood gossip chains, then into the cold glare of social media. Within days, old friends were whispering. Church acquaintances were exchanging knowing looks, and colleagues were politely distancing themselves. Michael's business suffered first. Clients began pulling listings, wary of a man whose own ethics were now in question. If he'd cheat his own mother, one remarked, what would he do to me in a deal? The whispers carved through his reputation like acid, undoing years of self-styled success. Sarah fared no better. At her office, conversations stuttered into silence when she entered. Side glances, forced smiles, and awkward pauses became her daily reality. She was the subject of thinly veiled jokes in the break room. Promotions that once seemed within reach evaporated. Their greed, so carefully concealed in whispers, had become public fodder. Desperate, the siblings reached for reconciliation. Tearful phone calls, voicemails drenched with regret. Mom, we're sorry. We were just scared about money. Please, don't shut us out. Eleanor listened but did not bend. Her voice, when she answered, was calm and unwavering. Actions have consequences, she said. I will not pretend this didn't happen. While her children flailed in the storm they had summoned, Eleanor set her own course with quiet dignity. She sold the house, not in some spectacle, but quietly, deliberately. Every cent of the proceeds flowed into the veterans' charity Robert had cherished. At the VFW Hall, she unveiled a plaque. In honor of Robert Thompson, beloved husband, veteran, and patriot. The men in uniform saluted, tears in their eyes, and Eleanor felt a peace that outshone the bitterness of betrayal. Packing up her life was bittersweet. She wrapped Robert's medals carefully, folded their wedding album, and slipped into boxes the laughter of decades past. She kept the good. The memories of Christmas mornings, of Robert's laugh booming through the house, of children's birthdays before ambition soured their hearts. The pain she left behind, sealing it away like dust she would not carry to her next home. Her move to Florida unfolded smoothly, a liberation disguised as relocation. Sarasota welcomed her with sun-drenched skies and the soft lull of waves against the shore. Her condo overlooked the ocean. Mornings began with gentle beach walks, the surf kissing her ankles, her lungs filling with salty air. She joined a local veterans support center as a volunteer, pouring her energy into those who needed it most. In giving, she found healing. The charity thrived with her donation. A new wing rose at a rehabilitation center, built in part with Robert's legacy. Eleanor's name, etched as a donor, gleamed on a wall dedicated to honor. She visited once, running her fingers over the engraving, whispering, "For you, love. We kept our promise." Occasional updates trickled in from distant relatives. Michael's marriage strained under financial pressure. His wife tired of excuses. Sarah sold her luxury car, downsizing into a modest apartment. Their lives shrank, but Eleanor felt no malice, only closure. Justice had run its course, and her heart felt lighter in the Florida sun. The old ties dissolved quietly. There were no more family holidays, no more obligatory calls. Instead, Eleanor filled her calendar with new connections, potlucks with neighbors, bridge games with widows who shared her scars, yoga classes that stretched her soul as much as her body. She even allowed herself a gentle romance with a widower veteran who understood loss and resilience. The isolation her children had plotted for her never arrived. Instead, it circled back onto them, leaving them to face the cold stares and empty rooms they had wished upon her. Eleanor thrived, free from their shadows. One evening, she placed Robert's photo on the windowsill, the sea breeze lifting the edges of the frame. "We did it, love," she murmured, voice soft but sure. "Your honor is preserved. Our story ends the way it should." Life had not ended in betrayal. It had begun anew, in strength. Eleanor's final chapter was not of loss, but of empowerment. She proved to herself and to anyone listening that age is no barrier to justice, that dignity, once defended, could light the path forward. And perhaps her story carries a lesson for us all: to cherish the bonds that are true, to guard against those who would exploit them, and to remember that endings often open the door to brighter beginnings. As Eleanor's story drifts into the Florida sunset, we're left not just with the image of a widow reclaiming her life, but with lessons that cut deeper than any act of revenge. This wasn't just a battle over property or inheritance. It was a fight for dignity, for memory, for the truth of what family should mean. First lesson: family isn't guaranteed by blood. It's built day by day on respect, care, and sacrifice. Michael and Sarah proved that entitlement and greed can corrode those bonds faster than time ever could. They wanted the spoils without the service, the inheritance without the honor. And in the end, they learned that betrayal leaves you with nothing. Second lesson: Eleanor's revenge wasn't about destruction. She didn't burn bridges or lash out. Instead, she chose redirection. She turned her loss into a legacy, her grief into a gift that honored veterans, men and women who, like Robert, knew the true meaning of sacrifice. That's the kind of justice that stings hardest, when the thing you schemed for is taken and given to someone worthier. Think about it. In a culture obsessed with quick wins and easy money, the real wealth is integrity. It's the steady, unglamorous commitment Robert carried home from the battlefield. That's the currency Eleanor spent, and that's the wealth she passed on. And the impact? Tremendous. The charity didn't just gain money, it gained momentum. Eleanor's donation built therapy programs, housing for vets, and lifelines for families struggling to transition back into civilian life. One widow's refusal to bow to greed became the seed for countless second chances. As for Michael and Sarah, their punishment was quieter, but no less brutal. Isolation, reputation in tatters, friends slipping away, clients lost. Every polite, smile-hiding judgment, every whispered conversation a reminder that greed had unmasked them. Will they ever rebuild? Maybe. But the scars they carry now, public shame, fractured trust, will remind them of the price of betrayal. Meanwhile, Eleanor's life became a rebirth. She left behind the icy silence of Chicago winters for the warmth of Sarasota's ocean breeze. Her move was more than geography. It was symbolic. She proved it's never too late to start again, to write a new chapter, even when people you love try to erase your story. The moral here is sharp and clear. Betrayal can wound you, but resilience is the salve. You don't have to meet cruelty with cruelty. Sometimes the strongest revenge is to channel hurt into purpose, to put your energy where it makes the world better. Eleanor didn't just preserve her dignity, she multiplied it by helping others. And here's where the story turns back to us. Have you ever faced shadows in your own family? Whispers of selfishness, small betrayals that cut deep. Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's talk about how honor prevails, even when greed tries to steal it, because that's what this story is really about. Patriotism isn't just about waving flags on holidays. It's about living with honor, protecting those who are vulnerable, preserving the legacies of those who gave everything. Eleanor did that. Not with a gun, not with fury, but with a pen, a will, and unshakable resolve. For viewers, may this tale be a reminder. Be vigilant. Watch for greed in the corners of your family, in your community. Stand firm in defense of the people who raised us, who gave us the foundations of our lives. Empathy for our elders isn't charity, it's justice. And in the end, justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet signature on a legal document that reverberates for generations. Eleanor's piece wasn't flashy, but it was profound. A testament to the power of quiet, strength, of patience, of fighting for what's right, without losing your soul in the process. So, what do you think? Did Michael and Sarah get what they deserved? If Eleanor's revenge tasted satisfying to you, smash that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Payback Stories for more tales, where betrayal meets its match. Until next time, guard your heart, honor your legacy, and never, ever underestimate the fire in a widow's soul.